In 1994, 3 boys vanished from a small Oregon town. Only one came back 30 years later. The same age, unable to speak, and drawing rooms no one remembered building. What started as a missing persons case unraveled into something deeper. An erased facility, a 4th child no one counted, and a system built to silence. She never had a name, but they called her Hope, and she was never meant to be found. Before we begin, please subscribe to support the channel and help bring stories like this into the light. The man was barefoot, shivering, and walking along the shoulder of Route 9 when the truck driver saw him. It was early morning, not quite light, the fog still low to the ground, when the driver's headlights swept across him. A quick swerve avoided disaster. The trucker pulled over, got out, and called to him. The man didn't respond. He just stood there, mid-30s looking at most, dressed in threadbare clothes and covered in dirt. He had no ID, no wallet, and barely spoke when first responders arrived. Just one word, murmured under his breath again and again. Caleb. Within hours, he was taken to Elbridge County Hospital, where he was treated for dehydration, anemia, and prolonged exposure. Police suspected transient behavior, maybe schizophrenia, possibly drugs, but the blood work told a different story. 3 days later, the DNA results came back. Caleb Turner, last seen July 4th, 1994. Age at disappearance, 12. Presumed dead for over 20 years. But Caleb Turner wasn't dead. He was 42 years old, and for some reason, he hadn't aged a day. The news spread like a spark across dry pine. Missing boy returns. 30 years later, looks 12. Of course, the tabloids twisted the details. Claims of government bunkers, UFOs, cryogenic sleep. But in Elbridge, people didn't think of theories. They thought of the other 2 boys, Luis Medina, Daniel Reed. All 3 were last seen together, riding their bikes toward the trail behind Sutter's Creek Park. A holiday afternoon. Fireworks were planned that night. Only one came back. Anna Crowley sat in her tiny Brooklyn apartment when the story broke. She was brushing her teeth when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Her toothbrush froze mid-air as she read the name, Caleb Turner. She hadn't heard that name in years, but it hit like a sucker punch. Caleb had been in her 7th grade class. She remembered his laugh, remembered the way he was quiet in groups but drew intricate mazes in the corners of his notebook. She remembered the day he vanished, more vividly than most, because one of the other boys who disappeared, Daniel Reed, had been her next-door neighbor, and she remembered hearing his mom scream through the kitchen window when the police told her they hadn't found anything. That had been 30 years ago. Since then, Anna had left Elbridge, gone to school, worked her way into journalism. She wrote long-form investigative pieces now, mostly on rural corruption, education policy, foster care abuses. But this story, this was different. She called her editor that night. "I want to go back." "You sure?" "Sounds like a local ghost story." "No," she said. "It's a buried story, and one of them just came up for air." 2 days later, Anna stood on the cracked sidewalk of Main Street, Elbridge, Oregon. The town hadn't changed much. Same boarded storefronts, same grocery store sign hanging crooked, same smell of pine, engine oil, and wet pavement after a storm. She checked into the cheapest motel on the edge of town and opened her notebook. Goal: reconstruct July 4th, 1994. 1. Where were they last seen? 2. Who filed the missing persons report? 3. Why was the trail never searched fully? 4. Who is blocking access now? She underlined that last question twice, because even in 1994, there had been whispers. The original case file was still technically open, but after 30 years, most of it had been archived into storage. She visited the sheriff's office anyway. A new deputy, young, fresh uniform, gave her a tight smile when she introduced herself. "You're the reporter?" "Just trying to understand the timeline." "The boy's safe. That's what matters now. What about the others?" He shifted uncomfortably. "There's no evidence they're still alive." She asked about interviewing Caleb. She expected a firm no. What she got instead was a softer deflection. "Family hasn't approved media access and, well, he's not really talking. At all. Not yet. Sometimes he just stares." That afternoon, Anna visited Rebecca Turner, Caleb's sister. She'd aged, of course, mid-40s now, hair pulled back, tired around the eyes. The house was modest, tidy, worn. A wreath on the door, a security camera above it. Rebecca didn't open right away. When she did, her voice was hoarse. "I don't know what to say to you." "You don't have to say anything. I just want to understand." "Understand what?" she said. "Where he was. Why he won't talk. Why he's not the same. Join the club." But then she softened, invited Anna in, poured coffee that neither of them touched. "He still loves peanut butter sandwiches. He still watches cartoons, but he doesn't know what an iPhone is." "Do you think it's trauma?" "I think, wherever he was, they didn't let him grow up." Anna scribbled in her notebook. Rebecca reached into a drawer and slid something across the table. A folded piece of paper, crumpled, a child's drawing. 2 boys. Stick figures, standing next to a box-like structure. Above it, in shaky handwriting, "We're still waiting." The 4th of July in 1994 was unusually hot in Elbridge. The kind of heat that made everything feel slightly distorted, like the air itself was exhausted. That day, Caleb Turner, Luis Medina, and Daniel Reed left home just after lunch. They told their parents they were riding bikes to Sutter's Creek to kill time before the fireworks. They never came back. No screams, no signs of struggle, no evidence of a predator. Just 3 bikes abandoned near the tree line, a trailhead, and silence. Anna Crowley knew all of this from memory, not from the files. She was 13 that summer. Elbridge was the kind of place where kids still played outside until dark, where bikes meant freedom, and fireworks felt like magic. She remembered the search parties, volunteers walking shoulder to shoulder through tall grass, K9 units brought in from the next county, the whisper that maybe they had just run away, crushed a week later when no one came home. No one wanted to admit that something terrible had happened, but after a while, everyone started pretending nothing had. Now, 30 years later, Anna sat across from Detective Raymond Kessler, retired, sipping lukewarm coffee in a diner that hadn't changed its wallpaper since the 80s. He still wore his badge on a chain around his neck, not officially, just habit. His hair was mostly gray now. His hands shook when he brought the mug to his lips. "You're here about Caleb. I'm writing a long-form piece. I want to reconstruct what happened. Real timelines, real people, no theories." "That's a first," he said. "You know how many people have tried to make this into a UFO story?" Anna didn't smile. "I remember that summer." "You were a kid." "So were they." Kessler set the mug down slowly. "It was the worst case I ever worked. Not because we couldn't solve it, because we weren't allowed to." "What do you mean?" "Resources got pulled, boundaries got drawn, search zones were redrawn, narrower, less aggressive. We got pressure from above to focus local." "You think someone knew where they went?" "I think someone didn't want us to find them." Anna blinked. That wasn't a theory. That was a statement. She drove next to the old trailhead after lunch. Sutter's Creek Park was still there, barely. The picnic benches were rusted, the sign half buried in overgrowth. The trail itself was blocked with a city-placed wooden barrier, nailed with a private land. No trespassing sign in faded red. Behind the trees, the forest was dense and quiet. It didn't feel haunted. It just felt abandoned. She stood there for a long time, imagining them. 3 boys, sweat-slicked hair, skinned knees, dirt under their fingernails. Bikes leaning against trees, maybe a dare, maybe a path they hadn't taken before. A wrong turn. She took a photo, not for the article, just to remind herself that the trail was real. The silence wasn't imagined. Back at her motel, Anna opened the original police report from July 4th, 1994. She had filed a records request 2 weeks ago and received a partial copy. Dozens of pages were missing. Some pages were redacted without explanation. She focused on what she did have. 12:40 p.m. Boys leave their homes 3:15 p.m. Neighbor reports seeing them entering Sutter's Creek 4:05 p.m. All 3 bikes found abandoned 4:30 p.m. Parents call in missing persons 6:15 p.m. Officers begin local search day 2. Search expands to 3-mile radius day 3. FBI notified day 6. Search narrowed to local suspects only day 12. Case goes cold. There were early tips. A white van. A man walking with one of the boys. None of them followed through. But one thing stood out. Interview with volunteer searcher, name withheld. Refused to continue search in Zone D. Reported strange structures in the woods, but withdrew statement next day. Anna circled it, then underlined it. She checked the attached field map. Zone D was the private property section behind the trail. That evening, Anna sat on the motel bed with a map spread across her lap, and photos from the police archive scattered around her. The trail, the bikes, a field team. She pulled out her voice recorder. Day 1, Elbridge, Oregon. Caleb Turner has returned, but the real story is buried under 30 years of dust, red tape, and silence. The town wants this to be a miracle. But miracles don't leave holes in records. Miracles don't erase entire zones of a search map. And miracles don't come back alone. She clicked the recorder off and stared at the last photo. The bikes, lying side by side, neatly, too neatly. The next morning, Anna found the house she hadn't visited in years, the one next to hers growing up. The Reeds had moved out long ago, but the current owner let her look around the backyard. The old oak tree was still there. The swing Daniel had loved was gone. She remembered him kicking his feet up, trying to loop over the bar. He never made it. She remembered the night he vanished, how the police lights turned the street blue, how the door stayed open for hours, how his mother sat on the curb until dawn, and how the town stopped talking about it, not because they forgot, but because it hurt too much to remember. Anna took one last look and turned to go. She stopped by Elbridge Elementary on her way back to town. It was summer and the building was closed, but the secretary let her look at the old yearbooks. She found the one from 1994, page 27. Class 6B, Caleb Turner, Luis Medina, Daniel Reed. Their photos were all next to each other, smiling, alive. Beneath Caleb's photo, someone had written in pen, "Gone but not forgotten." The ink had smeared over the years, faded but still legible. Anna touched the page. "2 are still gone," she whispered. "And no one has forgotten anything. We just stopped saying it out loud." The man who had made the call was still alive. Ernest Mallory, now 84, lived in a small assisted living home just outside of Elbridge. His name had been redacted from the 1994 report, but Anna found him through the original call log, still preserved on microfiche in the county archive. One entry at 4:27 p.m. on July 4th stood out. Caller reports white van parked near park boundary. Claims to have seen 3 boys near vehicle. Officer response logged, inconclusive. No follow-up documented. No follow-up, no report. Not even a formal statement. It wasn't just a cold trail. It had been frozen on purpose. Anna called the facility. Ernest still took visitors. When she introduced herself, the nurse said something that stuck with her. "He remembers more than people want him to." The man who opened the door to the facility's sunroom had sharp eyes and a trembling voice. He wore a cardigan over a plaid shirt, and the oxygen tube hooked behind his ears wheezed every few seconds. He sat down across from Anna and looked at her long and hard. "You're not family." "No, sir. I'm a journalist." "You're the one asking about the van?" "Yes. July 4th, 1994. I think you saw something that day." He nodded slowly. "People said I was confused. Said I was old even then. But I know what I saw. I was walking my dog along the outer trail, that old path near the property line, before they put the sign up. Heard laughter, boys' voices, figured some kids were out messing around before fireworks. Then I saw it. White van, parked half in the trees, back doors open. I remember because the plates were scratched out, just scraped off, like someone used a screwdriver or something. One boy, dark hair, was standing outside. Looked nervous. Another was sitting at the edge of the van. There was a third. Inside, didn't see his face. And there was a man. Thin, long jacket, talking soft, not yelling, calm, like a teacher. The whole thing felt wrong. Too quiet, like it wasn't summer anymore. Anna's fingers were tight around her pen. "Did you tell the police this?" "I called before I even got home. But when they came by, they didn't want details. Told me they'd checked it out already. Told me I must have confused the day. Said I wasn't needed." He shook his head, jaw stiff. "Next thing I know, the van's never mentioned again, but the boys were gone. And I knew they didn't ride away on their own." On the drive back to her motel, Anna replayed the audio of their conversation. His words were clear. His memory, for a man in his 80s, was unsettlingly precise. The scratched plates, the white van, the quiet man. It hadn't just been a tip. It had been a witness account. Buried. Why? She pulled over on the side of the road and opened her laptop. She began cross-referencing any reports of similar vans in the area from that year. One result. A vague reference in a foster care oversight committee report filed in September 1994, 3 months after the boys vanished. Unregistered vehicle seen parked behind private property owned by New Promise Covenant. Report dismissed due to lack of identifying information. New Promise Covenant. The name was faint in her memory, something she'd seen in passing while researching troubled group homes. The organization had dissolved in 1997 amid allegations of unconventional child-rearing practices. Anna sat in the car for a long moment. 3 boys went missing. 1 boy returned. And the one lead that might connect them was tied to a group that no longer legally existed. That night, Anna sat with her notes scattered across the motel room table. The wall above her desk was now taped with clippings, photos, hand-drawn maps. The bikes, the trail, the van. A printed version of Caleb's drawing. And in the center, 3 names: Caleb Turner, Louis Medina, Daniel Reed. She stared at them until her vision blurred. Then she added a 4th name, in pencil, with a question mark beside it. The white van, the man in the coat, the missing page from the police file. Something was still missing. She didn't know what yet. But someone did. The next morning, Anna drove to the county clerk's office and requested land ownership records for the trail and surrounding area, specifically parcels adjacent to Sutter's Creek between 1990 and 2000. Most parcels were publicly owned or clearly listed. One wasn't. Lot 14-D, a 10-acre strip right behind the private property sign. Owned between 1992 and 1997 by New Promise Covenant, Inc. had no business license on file, no tax history, no reason for existing there, except that it did. Anna photocopied everything and walked back to her car. She didn't start the engine. She sat still, watching the heat ripple across the hood. If someone built something there, someplace the boys were taken, it had been erased piece by piece. Legally, bureaucratically, quietly. She pulled out her voice recorder again. "Day 3, New Promise Covenant held the only private lot behind Sutter's Creek Trail during the time of the boys' disappearance. No paper trail, no prosecution, no structure listed on the property tax, but one white van was seen going there. No one followed it. She looked out the window at the trees. Some stories are lost, others are hidden. This one was buried. The town clerk looked confused when Anna asked about Lot 14-D. That parcel hasn't been active in years, she said, peering at the screen. It was delisted in 1997. No transfer records, no demolition permits. It just expired. What does that mean? Technically, it's considered dormant land. No official ownership, no structure on file, no taxes owed. So it just sits there. It's forest. No one wants it. Anna thanked her, printed the file, and left with a cold certainty that someone had gone to great lengths to make sure Lot 14-D looked unremarkable. At least on paper. But land doesn't hide stories. People do. That night, in her motel room, Anna scoured newspaper archives and court records for any mention of New Promise Covenant. Not much surfaced, a few blurry ads about restorative spiritual care for wayward youth. Some classified listings for live-in staff. But then she found it. State Department of Human Services Internal Memo, 1997. Subject: immediate shutdown of New Promise Covenant following non-compliance with juvenile housing regulations. Reason: failure to meet minimum safety and reporting standards. Outcome: no charges filed. Files sealed under patient confidentiality protections. The language was clinical, sanitized, but one phrase stood out. 3 residents were unaccounted for during the final site inspection. Staff claimed paper records were lost in a fire. Anna sat back in her chair. 3 residents, 1997, unaccounted for. She clicked into her notes and cross-referenced dates. Caleb, Luis, and Daniel vanished in 1994. The group was shut down in 1997 and claimed some children had been lost to paperwork. They weren't lost, she murmured. They were never supposed to be counted. It took 2 more days to track someone down. A woman named Monica Grady, 56, former employee at New Promise Covenant between 1993 and 1996. Her name had appeared on an old tax form as a house supervisor. She was now living under a different last name, working at a non-profit in eastern Washington. Anna sent her a carefully worded email, polite but direct. She didn't expect a response, but the next morning she received a reply. I'll talk, but not in writing. In person only. No recording. They met at a diner just outside Spokane. Monica was small, serious, with lines around her eyes that looked like they'd been etched from guilt, not age. She spoke only after they were seated, and the waitress had walked away. I read your article. The one about Caleb. You knew him? I remember him. Barely. He was one of the quiet ones. Anna kept her notebook closed. The state closed the place, said there were safety violations, missing records. That's the nice version. It wasn't a home. It was an experiment. What kind of experiment? They called it silence conditioning. Said they were helping kids with behavioral issues, defiance, disobedience. In reality, they were trying to erase non-compliance. Monica's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. They locked the worst cases underground. No visitors, no schooling, just Bible recitation, repetition drills, silence hours, sometimes for days. The goal wasn't rehabilitation. It was erasure, compliance through absence. Anna finally spoke. And the boys who disappeared in Elbridge? Caleb, Luis, Daniel. They weren't listed. That was the point. Some kids were court-ordered. Others were off-the-books referrals, dropped by family, churches, even police. Caleb was one of them. I remember him because he never spoke. He'd sit in the hallway for hours, staring at the wall. What about the others? I can't say for sure, but I remember 2 other boys around his age. One liked to draw, the other cried at night. I don't know their names. We weren't allowed to use names. Anna sat in stunned silence. Do you know what happened to them? Number Y left in '96. Place was falling apart. They stopped feeding the kids properly. Then one day, the ones from downstairs just weren't there anymore. And no one reported it? We were told they ran away, but the back stairs were bolted shut. I checked. Why are you talking to me now? Monica stared at her. Because one came back. That night, Anna wrote the first part of her exposé draft. Only one came back, the buried story behind Elbridge's vanished boys. She didn't include Monica's name, not yet, but she quoted her memories. She detailed the land record trail, the memo about unaccounted children, the missing van report. She described Lot 14D not as a mystery, but a map point. Then she ended with a single paragraph. There is no official record of Caleb Turner being placed at New Promise Covenant, but he was there, and now that he's come back, the silence is cracking. The question isn't whether the others are still alive. It's how far people went to make sure they were forgotten. She hit save, not publish. Not yet. Caleb Turner still hadn't spoken. It had been 6 weeks since his return, and the doctors said his silence wasn't due to physical trauma. He could speak. His vocal cords were intact. His reflexes normal. The cause, they said, was psychological. Selective mutism, prolonged trauma-induced dissociation, identity shock. But Anna had another word for it. Conditioning. She visited the hospital again, this time with Rebecca Turner's permission. Caleb was in a private room at a specialized care facility near Portland. The walls were white. No television, no music, just quiet. Rebecca greeted her at the door, looking worn but composed. He's better with a routine, she said softly. He eats, sleeps, but he won't talk, not even to me. Has he written anything? Only drawings. Sometimes I think it's his way of trying to talk. Caleb was sitting cross-legged on the floor when Anna entered, sketching with a pencil on lined paper. His hands were still, too still for someone his age, but his grip was tight. He didn't look up. Anna lowered herself to the floor beside him, saying nothing. She glanced at the paper. It was a room, a long rectangular box drawn from a child's perspective. The walls were marked with slanted lines, like scratches. At the back of the room, a door with no handle. And on the floor, 3 stick figures. One of them was curled in a corner. Anna gently pointed to it. Is that you? Caleb paused, then nodded. Her throat tightened. Later that night, Anna returned to her motel room and opened her laptop. She started digging through public health archives and treatment center inspection reports. Anything tied to New Promise Covenant or similar programs in the region during the '90s. She found something unexpected. An internal memo from Oregon Child Services, dated January 1995, referencing a program called the Silence Doctrine. Subject: Conditional Approval for Behavioral Compliance Program Pilot. Code: SD-47. Implementation approved on privately held property via faith-based rehabilitation clause. Designated for youth requiring intense corrective structure. Operated under religious exemption. There were no names, no location listed, but she recognized the coded term, Silence Doctrine. Not a metaphor, a program. Anna printed it, then called Monica Grady again. You ever hear that term, Silence Doctrine? Yes, Monica said, instantly. That's what they called the sessions. What did they do? Isolation, repetition, mirror therapy. They made kids stare at themselves until they broke down, took away names, took away speech. You either conformed or disappeared. And Caleb, he didn't talk, so they left him in longer. They thought silence meant success. Anna couldn't sleep that night. She stared at the map pinned to her motel wall. Lot 14D, the trail, the now sealed-off access roads. She thought of Ernest's story, of Monica's whispered fear, of the drawing with the door and the scratch lines. She pulled out her notebook and flipped to a blank page. She wrote, "Caleb didn't escape. He was released. But why now? Why only him?" The next day, she went back to the facility. Rebecca met her in the hallway. "He drew something else," she said. "I think it's for you." She handed Anna the page. It was another room, this time with rows of clocks on the wall, but all the clock faces were blank. Below them were two stick figures, side by side. Above them, Caleb had written, in capital, blocky letters, "We never left." And in the bottom right corner, one more figure, standing alone, away from the rest. Circle around the head, no face, a black line for a mouth, crossed out. Anna traced it with her thumb. It wasn't just trauma. It was a system. That evening, Anna updated her draft with a new section. The system that erased them. What began as a juvenile rehabilitation program devolved into something more deliberate, a structured effort to suppress children who didn't conform to expected norms of behavior or obedience. In multiple interviews, former staff have confirmed the presence of underground rooms, isolation exercises, and unregistered minors held without oversight. A leaked memo from 1995 describes the silence doctrine, a conditioning model approved under religious exemptions that permitted complete social withdrawal as therapy. But this wasn't therapy. It was erasure. Anna paused before saving. In Caleb's latest drawing, the figure with the crossed-out face wasn't just different. It was watching the others, from a distance, like someone still inside, or someone who never left the room at all. The building looked like every government office Anna had ever visited. Beige walls, dusty fake plants, and a front desk staffed by someone who seemed trained in the art of polite indifference. The Oregon State Attorney General's office in Salem was her next stop, not to pitch a story, but to push for action. She had the documents, the interviews, the drawings, and Caleb Turner himself, a living witness to a facility that had operated beyond the reach of law for years. But she knew better than to walk in with only emotion. She walked in with a case file. "We're reviewing your submission," the assistant said after taking her folder. "How long will that take?" "Depends on legal scope and statute limitations. Many of these incidents are over 30 years old. The children were hidden off the books. Some never documented at all. I understand, but without formal reports or death records, it's..." She hesitated. "Difficult to prioritize." Anna leaned forward. "I'm not asking for a conviction. I'm asking for a shovel and a search warrant for a 10-acre lot full of ghosts." The assistant blinked, flustered. "We'll be in touch." She wouldn't hold her breath. In the hallway, Anna sat on a bench and pulled out her recorder. Day 17. The state is reluctant to act. No official crime on the books. No known bodies. No surviving corporate entity. The law favors paperwork, not people. And the only survivor is still mute. She clicked it off, exhausted. There were moments in stories like this, ones she'd written before, where the weight of silence felt bigger than the truth. The system didn't need to lie. It just needed to wait until people stopped asking. But Anna didn't plan to wait. That night back in Elbridge, she sat across from Jeanette, the records clerk who had helped her earlier. They met at a diner after hours. Jeanette wore a cardigan over her uniform and looked both tired and alert, like someone who had stayed quiet too long and was ready to talk. "I checked the archives again," Jeanette said. "Something's off." She slid a thin envelope across the table. Inside were copies of sealed juvenile records from 1994 to 1997. The folder was marked with a red label, "Access Restricted, Private Case Logs." These should have been destroyed with the dissolution of New Promise Covenant, but one file was archived by mistake. Anna opened it. No name, just a case number, number NP074-C. Unregistered minor, placed for nonverbal resistance. Outcome, non-compliant. Final note, facility loss. No formal withdrawal or burial logged. Anna froze. What does that mean? It means the child vanished. was never recorded as discharged, adopted, or deceased. Just written off. At the bottom of the page, one word was handwritten: suppressed. Anna felt the cold spread through her chest. So they knew. Someone did, Jeanette said. But the statutes expired on most of this. The agency responsible is dissolved, and because the child was unregistered, no missing persons file was ever created, which means no crime. Legally, number morally, Jeanette looked her in the eye. They buried a child, Anna, and they didn't even give her a name. The next morning, Anna filed a request with the State Department of Human Services to access the sealed facility blueprints for the new Promise Covenant property. She didn't expect it to go through, but she wanted it in the system. Then she did what journalists do when bureaucracy stalls. She went public. New article draft. The children who weren't counted. In rural Oregon, 3 boys vanished in 1994. Only one came back, 30 years later, mute and drawing memories of rooms with no clocks, doors with no handles, and faces that weren't allowed to speak. But behind his return is a trail of paperwork, sealed records, and a 10-acre piece of land that once housed a facility claiming to offer spiritual rehabilitation. What they offered instead was silence, a conditioning system called the Silence Doctrine, a place where names were stripped and compliance was rewarded with invisibility. There are no known graves, no missing persons reports, just one boy who came back, and a file with one word across the bottom: suppressed. We know their names now: Caleb Turner, Luis Medina, Daniel Reed. But there may be others. Ones the records never kept. The question is no longer what happened. It's how long people have known. She hit publish. Within hours, it began circulating. Shared by regional reporters, cold case forums, legal advocates. The silence began to ripple. But the state still hadn't called her back. 2 days later, Anna received an anonymous message in her inbox. No sender, no subject. Just a screenshot. Parcel 14-D. Hazmat inspection scheduled. Due to mold asbestos concerns. Date: 10 days from today. Issued by private third-party contractor, redacted. They weren't going to investigate. They were going to demolish. Anna sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the screen. They were going to clear the land, quietly, legally, permanently. No investigation, no warrant, no bodies, just silence. Again. She called Jeanette. We have 10 days before the land is gone. I'll see what I can find. But Anna, what? If you go digging in that place, make sure someone knows where you are. The message came through a private inbox Anna had created for tips related to the article. Most were junk, ghost stories, conspiracy theories, a few well-meaning but factless claims. This one was different. The subject line simply read, I was there. The body of the email was short. My name's Marcus Traynor. I lived at New Promise in 1994. I remember a kid who drew clocks and another who cried a lot. I never saw them leave. I've never talked about this before. I'll talk to you, one time, in person. Don't bring anyone else. Anna stared at the message, then read it again. This wasn't a hunch or a rumor. This was a survivor. They met 2 days later at a roadside diner about an hour outside of Eugene. Marcus Traynor was 40, thin, quiet, with anxious eyes that scanned the parking lot before he even approached the door. He didn't shake her hand. He slid into the booth and kept his arms crossed. You're the reporter. You're the first person to say you live there. Most of us don't talk. It was drilled into us. Drilled? Every day. Quiet kids get to go home. Talkers get the room. Anna opened her notebook but didn't write yet. She waited. Marcus glanced down at the table. I lied to get out. Told them I didn't hear the voices anymore. Told them I believed what they believed. And the boys? One of them, The quiet one. They kept him downstairs. Anna leaned in slightly. Downstairs. Concrete, no lights, just this little lamp by the door. No windows. They called it the reflection room. Said if you stayed long enough, you'd stop being disobedient. What happened to the others? I don't know, but one day they just weren't there. All their stuff was gone. The staff said they ran away. Did they? No, he said flatly. No one ran from that place. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased. A drawing. A crude floor plan, sketched from memory. This was the basement, best I can remember. 2 rooms were marked. One was labeled prayer. The other, box. Anna pointed at it. What was this? Where they kept the ones they gave up on. Gave up? Some kids broke, others didn't. If you kept fighting, they put you in the box. Said it was the last step. If you didn't come back from that, you didn't come back. He looked at her for a long time. There was a girl down there, too. Small, never spoke, just stared at the wall. Drew on it sometimes. I saw her once when they made me clean the floors. Anna's heart skipped. A girl? Do you remember her name? We didn't have names in there, only codes. That night, Anna pinned Marcus's drawing to the wall of her motel room. Next to it, Caleb's sketch. The similarities were unmistakable. The layout, the door with no handle, the scratch marks on the walls. 2 children, 2 perspectives, 1 place. Then she noticed something new. In Caleb's latest drawing, tucked into the corner of the page, was a 4th figure, barely visible, drawn in faint pencil, small, curled up, separate from the others. She had missed it before. This wasn't a forgotten detail. It was someone no one had ever asked about. Anna called Rebecca the next morning. Can you ask Caleb something? He still doesn't talk. Just give him a new sheet of paper. Ask him to draw what's missing. 2 hours later, Rebecca sent a photo by text. Caleb had drawn the room again, but this time he had labeled it. Me, Luis, Daniel. And in the corner, girl, don't know her name. She never left. Anna sat in silence. There were always 3 names, until now. She never left. No record, no file, no witness. Just a shadow in the back of a child's mind. Who was she, and what happened to her? Anna updated her outline. Known children. Caleb Turner, returned, mute. Luis Medina, presumed deceased. Daniel Reed, presumed deceased. Unknown girl. No record. Seen by 2 survivors. She wrote 1 word beside the girl's entry. Suppressed? Later that afternoon, Anna received a call from Jeanette. I found something weird, she said. In the intake logs from '94, there's a blank line in the ledger, right after Caleb's name. No name, no ID, just a code. G74, could that be her? Possibly. The entry was logged but never filed. No discharge, no parent signature, she just exists on that line. Where's the paper now? Buried in the old archive vault, but I'm pulling it. Anna stood up, pacing. The girl wasn't a ghost. She was just left out on purpose. That night, Anna sat across from her motel wall of clippings. She took a marker and wrote 1 more name, or at least a placeholder, above the photos. G74. The unknown girl. Then she wrote a question under it. Why was she never supposed to be found? The file was brittle and faded, the ink slightly smeared from years in storage. Jeanette slid it across the table in the dim records vault, her gloves leaving faint impressions on the paper. This is what we missed. Anna leaned over it, eyes scanning the document. It wasn't much, just a single ledger page from 1994, stamped by New Promise Covenant, listing children processed into the facility. A few had names, most had case codes, and 1 line was almost entirely blank. Intake ID G74 age, approximately 9, estimated, assigned room B2. Notes, nonverbal, uncooperative, isolated per staff directive. There was no discharge date, no exit record, no parent signature, just a faint pencil mark in the corner. SP. Anna underlined it. What's that mean? In old files, SP usually meant special placement, Jeanette said. Code for kids brought in through unofficial channels, churches, private deals, sometimes even law enforcement. Not wards of the state. Just kids someone wanted gone. Anna felt her stomach tighten. So they never had to report her. No one ever came looking. Not officially. And Caleb remembers her. Which means she was real. But to the system, Jeanette tapped the code again. She never logged in. So she never had to log out. Back in her motel room, Anna opened her voice recorder. Day 20. There was a fourth child. No name, no file in the public system. Just a code, G74. A girl, age 9, last seen in a basement room called The Box. She was never registered as a missing person. Never withdrawn from the program. On paper, she didn't exist. But 2 survivors remember her. One says she never left. She paused, then added, what happens when a child is disappeared correctly? When no law is broken because no record exists. The next day, Anna drove to the county courthouse and requested contractor records related to the original construction of the new Promise facility. She expected a fight. Instead, she was given a single cardboard box marked Inactive Construction, 1991 to 1994. Inside were blueprints, invoices, permits, and something more. A payment log, dated 1993. Not from the state, not from the organization itself, but from a private donor, E. Rutherford Foundation. Behavioral Study Disbursement, $210,000. Designated for Isolation Wing, Observation Rooms, Sub-Level 2. Confidential Design. Anna stared at the name. Rutherford. It wasn't a religious group. It was a privately funded experiment. The isolation wasn't spiritual. It was behavioral testing. She dug deeper, pulled up every reference she could find on the Rutherford Foundation. Nothing recent, nothing public. But one legal article from 2002 mentioned them in passing. A case where a behavioral rehab program for adolescents was shut down in Utah. Same language. Nonverbal compliance programs. Cognitive adjustment for chronic defiance. Test subjects placed anonymously via alternate referral channels. It wasn't just an Oregon problem. It was a model. Anna sat in her car, the blueprints and donor documents in her lap. A pattern was emerging. The new Promise facility hadn't just failed oversight. It had been designed to avoid it. The donors had paid to build rooms that didn't exist on maps. Staff were trained to isolate non-compliant children. Some were given codes instead of names, and when they didn't conform, they vanished. That night, she updated her investigation timeline. Internal report. Timeline of evidence. 1994. 3 boys disappear near Elbridge, Oregon. Lot 14-D, privately owned by New Promise Covenant. Caleb Turner resurfaces in 2024, unchanged in age. Drawings match layout of facility basement. Former employee confirms use of rooms called Box and Reflection. Survivor Marcus Traynor confirms seeing nonverbal girl. Facility intake records list unregistered child. G74. Donor file links isolation program to private foundation. E. Rutherford. No exit record. No burial record. No file. Conclusion. The girl was placed intentionally, silenced methodically, and never removed. Anna paused, then added a final line. The erasure wasn't accidental. It was the point. Later that night, she received a new message through her encrypted inbox. No name, no subject, just one line. She was the control case. You don't want to keep digging. Anna stared at the screen, then deleted the message. Because she'd already started digging, and she wasn't stopping now. Caleb had begun drawing again. Only this time, it wasn't abstract. It was precise. Lines were ruler straight, angles were consistent, and in the corner of the page, for the first time, was a title written in shaky block letters, Where We Were. Rebecca Turner handed the drawing to Anna in the facility's visitor room. Caleb sat silently in the background, flipping a pencil between his fingers, not looking up. Anna studied the image. It looked like a floor plan. A rectangle bisected into smaller rooms, one labeled stairs, one marked prayer, another FOOD, and at the far bottom, boxed in alone, a single room labeled She Stayed Here. Above it, written in childlike scrawl, box room, no light, no door. Next to the label, a circle shaded in black. A hatch? A pit? Anna wasn't sure, but Caleb had drawn an arrow pointing from that circle to the surface, and beside the arrow, he'd written, I climbed. They didn't. Anna left that afternoon with the map folded in her satchel and her recorder already rolling. Day 24. Caleb has given us a floor plan. It matches Marcus Trainor's testimony. Same stairwell, same room layout. But this time, he's marked a spot, a direction, a way out, one that only he took, and one they didn't. She called Jeanette. I need a location match, the original property plans. Is there any substructure beneath the new promised land that includes a sealed floor area? There was a pause. Then the sound of shuffling paper. There's something. Hold on. A few minutes later, there's a square section, 10 by 10 feet, marked on the 1993 permit as Storage Access Pit. It's just outside the main blueprint. No walls, no stairs, just a slab over it now. Is it still intact? No idea. But if it's where I think it is. She hesitated. What? They scheduled the demolition crews to hit that exact area first. 2 days later, Anna stood at the edge of Lot 14D, staring down at the overgrown clearing behind the posted sign. The crew hadn't arrived yet. The warning flags were up, and a chain-link barrier wrapped loosely around the old trailhead. But no one stopped her from slipping past. She carried gloves, a flashlight, and Caleb's drawing. The air was damp. The silence heavy. At the far edge of the clearing, the brush thinned, revealing an irregular concrete slab, about the size of a garden shed base. She approached slowly. There, in the center, just as Caleb had drawn it, a discolored metal ring, flush with the slab. Not a door, not a latch, a sealed cover. She dropped to her knees and brushed away years of moss and pine needles. The steel was rusted at the edges, but intact. Anna pulled a crowbar from her bag. It took 30 minutes. The seal groaned when it broke, a wet, metallic crack that echoed across the trees. Beneath the slab was a narrow hatch, dark, airless, lined with concrete. Anna lowered her flashlight. The beam caught something beneath. A floor, wooden planks, and a wall. She dropped into the hole. The air was thick, dry, like an attic sealed for decades. The room was barely 8 feet across, concrete walls, no light fixtures. And then she saw it. The wall was covered in scratches, some shallow, some deep. Thousands of them, words carved by hand, overlapping and uneven. She moved the light across. I'm still here. Please open the door. They forgot me. I was good. My name is... Then scratched out. In the center, etched deeper than the rest. No one comes back unless they're allowed. Anna stepped back, throat tightening. This wasn't a theory anymore. This was a grave. And then her flashlight hit something else. A pile of fabric in the corner, half buried beneath debris. She crouched, carefully lifting it. A small blanket, matted and frayed. And beneath it, a doll, threadbare, its button eyes scratched away. She didn't cry. She took photos. She collected samples. She climbed back out with the flashlight clenched in her fist like a weapon. She had what she needed. That night, back at her motel, Anna uploaded her findings to 3 encrypted backups, printed every photo, and labeled the evidence. She called Jeanette. The girl existed. She lived in a box under the foundation. There's no name, but the scratches. Jeanette. She tried to leave a record. Jeanette didn't respond right away. Then softly, "I'll get this to the right person, quietly, before they destroy it." Anna hung up, then opened a new blog post. New article, "The Final Room." They said the girl never existed, but I stood in her room today. I saw what she wrote. I held her doll. I traced the scratches she left with her fingernails against concrete walls. We still don't know her name, but we know she stayed. And now, the record she was denied belongs to us. The facility may be gone soon, but her silence no longer is. She hit publish, and then, only then, she allowed herself to weep. The article hit harder than any of the others. Within 24 hours, local reporters had descended on Elbridge. National podcasts requested interviews. Forums lit up with theories, photos, even former employees of similar rehab programs stepping forward with their own stories. But something else happened too, quietly. Anna received a message through her press contact inbox. Subject: "No more denials from Redacted." Message: "You found what was meant to stay hidden." She wasn't a mistake. She was the control. The funding depended on her. You're looking for Ernest Rutherford. You need to look at the board minutes from 1993. The trust knew. Attached was a scanned document. Letterhead: Mornington Educational Trust. Dated March 2, 1993. Topic: New Promise Initiative. Behavioral Compliance Grant, a single line, buried in the minutes. Approved final placement for unrecorded subject, G74, to satisfy external observation conditions set by private donor. They had placed her on purpose, not just to treat her, to measure what silence did to a child with no record. And the trust knew. Anna drove straight to Portland, to the address tied to Eleanor Rutherford, the founder of the foundation that funded New Promise. The house was old money, pale stone, ivy-covered, gated. She parked on the curb and walked to the intercom. Pressed once. "Yes?" A woman's voice. Steady, controlled. "My name is Anna Crowley. I'm the journalist who found the girl." Silence, then, "I thought you might come." The gate clicked open. Inside, Eleanor Rutherford sat in a high-backed chair beside a fireplace. White-haired, perfect posture, a presence that filled the room like a held breath. "You're looking for closure. I'm looking for accountability." Eleanor smiled faintly. "You already found the girl. Isn't that enough?" Anna stepped forward. "You put her there." "I funded an experiment. The board approved it. It was legal." "Legal doesn't mean right." "It means sanctioned," Eleanor said. "It means documented. Which is why your article won't matter in court. There's no plaintiff, no victim the state can name. Caleb Turner is real. Caleb came back. That makes him inconvenient, not admissible. And the girl? G74 ? She was selected, monitored. She did what none of the others could. She stayed silent. Anna's hands were clenched at her sides. She didn't stay silent. She screamed into the walls. But she never broke the rules. That's what mattered. Eleanor stood slowly. Some truths are heavier than the system built to carry them. And some children, she paused, are easier forgotten than heard. Anna stepped forward. Not anymore. Outside, Anna sat in her car and hit record. Day 28. I just looked one of them in the eye. She didn't deny it. She framed it as research, said silence was data, said the girl in the box had been placed as a control, to prove how long someone could endure abandonment. I don't know if justice exists for a child like G74. No file, no birth certificate, no gravestone. But I know she carved words into concrete. I know Caleb still draws her. And I know silence isn't a final state. It's a weapon, one they counted on. Until now. The next morning, Caleb Turner spoke for the first time. He was sitting in the hospital courtyard, sketching under a tree. A nurse had stepped away. Rebecca was reading nearby, and then she heard him whisper. Just one sentence. She asked me not to leave. No one told him what Anna found. No one had said the girl was real, but he knew. And the voice he'd buried for 30 years had finally surfaced. That afternoon, Anna wrote the closing lines of her full investigation, a piece she submitted not just to her blog, but to the New Yorker, ProPublica, and every legal clinic willing to read. Final article. She never left. They buried a child beneath concrete and called it treatment. They gave her no name, no number, no way out. They called it silence, but she carved the truth into the walls with her bare hands. We never heard her voice, but we can still listen. She ended the piece with a note. If you knew her, if you were there, or if you remember anything about a girl around age 9, placed at New Promise in 1994, contact me. You might be her last thread. And one day later, a name arrived. Not a name the state had. Not a school record, not even a birth certificate. Just a half-ripped hospital intake tag, found in a storage unit by someone who used to work transport. It read, Hope R. Intake 1994. Status, transfer. Pending, Anna stared at the tag. Hope. Caleb's final drawing had shown her curled in the corner, and in the corner, beside her, one word he'd never labeled before. Hope. It was a small plaque, brushed metal, about the size of a book cover, mounted to a stone just beneath the trees at the edge of Lot 14-D, where the slab used to be. The state had halted demolition. A joint investigation was still pending, but the land was officially marked as a preservation site. For now, at least. No camera crews, no ribbon cutting. Just 5 people standing in the quiet morning fog. Anna, Rebecca Turner, Caleb Jeanette, and Marcus Traynor. Caleb stood a few feet back, eyes fixed on the stone. His fingers brushed something in his pocket, a folded drawing Anna knew. The last one he'd made. No figures, no arrows, just a sun in the corner, and 4 stick people, all standing together. Anna stepped forward first. She placed a single flower at the base of the plaque, then read the words out loud. In memory of Hope R. She was here. She was real. And we remember her. No sermon, no prayer. Just that. That was enough. Later, as the sun crept higher and the others began to leave, Anna stayed behind. Caleb stood next to her, still quiet, still watching. You okay? She asked softly. He nodded. Then, barely above a whisper, she used to hum when they locked the door. Like a song she made up. Anna swallowed the lump in her throat. Do you remember the tune? No, he said, but I remember the feeling. It made it less dark. He handed her the drawing from his pocket. At the bottom, written in uneven letters, her name was Hope. Weeks passed. The story spread. The investigation widened. More survivors from similar programs began coming forward. Some remembered Hope. Others remembered girls just like her, unnamed, unlisted, quietly removed. Anna's reporting became part of a congressional review into privately funded behavioral programs. She was asked to testify, but none of that mattered as much as the final moment that stuck with her. It happened 3 months later, in the mailroom of a non-profit shelter in Seattle. A letter arrived in a plain envelope. Inside was a photo. A little girl, about 9, holding a cloth doll, smiling but not at the camera, off to the side. The back of the photo read, "Her name was Hope. We called her that because she never gave up." Anna stared at the handwriting. No signature, no return address, but she knew. Hope had existed. She had lived. And even in silence, she had reached someone. Anna placed the photo inside a file marked Recovered, then took out her pen. On the cover, she added one more word beneath the name: Remembered. Please subscribe and share it, because some names are still buried, and someone has to dig. Thank you for listening.